to Mark Esper right now, the former U.S. Defense Secretary, author of the bestseller A Sacred Oath. Mark, good to have you as always. First of all, what do you make of the surprise nature of this?
I think that is a significant part of this, Neil. It was a surprise. It caught the Israelis completely off guard, and you can't say anything, but it was an intelligence failure. And I think, look, we're dealing with a tactical situation on the ground, which is terrible and tragic for both the Israeli citizens and the Israeli military. But this is going to ripple in multiple ways. Being such a failure, will it cause the collapse of the Netanyahu government? Or will the Israeli people at least rally behind him for a while? So, that's going to be one effect of this that hasn't been discussed so far. We could speak about how it reaches from Tehran to the United States and elsewhere also.
You know, Secretary, I'm old enough to remember that Yom Kippur War, the start of that war, where it led, and the Arab community was joined by every key member, condemning the United States for what it claimed was a sponsorship and continued support after the attack in the war. They punished us with an oil embargo. We all know how that went, and it would be followed up 5 years later with still another embargo. Having said all of that, and I don't want to get ahead of our diplomatic skis here, but how do we deal with that, especially now with a very different Arab world?
Yeah, it's a good point. Obviously, the geopolitics are very different today in the Middle East than they were 50 years ago. And, the fact that Hamas attacked on both a holiday and an anniversary is significant. But I also think we have to take into account the fact that the word was that the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia were coming close to a deal on normalizing ties between, Saudi Arabia, other Arab countries, and Israel. And so the question is, in my mind, did Hamas do that also to spoil this agreement? What were they told to do so by their supporter Iran? That will have a big bearing on this. And already we see. I was told that the Saudis came out this morning and made a statement calling for a cessation of attacks, but at the same time blamed Israel for what happened. So it's clearly there's a major setback going to happen on this deal of normalization between the Saudis, other Arab states, and Israel.
Mark, I was looking forward to having you on because obviously a former defense secretary, but also a great student of history. This is the same date, the anniversary, back in 1981, on this very day that Anwar Sadat was killed. And many said he was targeted for trying to make peace or break the olive branch with Israel in the 1978, agreement, the Carter Accords that allowed for that. And he was turned on by his own soldiers, his own people. And I'm wondering what you just said about Saudi Arabia and this sort of delicately worded but still attack on Israel, that they are aware of that image and how that looks.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is, of course, since the peace agreement between the Israelis and the Egyptians, the Egyptians are clearly aligned with Israel, the United States on this. Neither are a fan of Hamas. Of course, Hamas subscribes to the Muslim Brotherhood, which Egypt detests. So the dynamics have changed, but Saudi Arabia clearly is the big player in the Middle East. And again, this is a major setback to further normalization of ties. But I keep on emphasizing the question will ultimately be, to what degree does this go back to Iran? We know that Tehran supplies arms, funds Hamas. Did they put them up to this? And of course, I'm sure the Israelis are worried right now, is a broader conflict possible? For example, if Israel goes hard and heavy into Gaza, which they certainly will, does this open up space for Hezbollah in the north of Israel, in southern Lebanon, to attack as well? And again, all this supplied, supported, funded by Iran. So this is going to, stretch quite far, and it's going to take a while to see how this plays out. And it will also have an impact in Washington, D.C. You can expect next week, when the House returns, there will be resolutions out there supporting Israel. The question about funding for Israel, providing military arms, will be on the table. I'm sure we will do it, but it will also call into question those who say we shouldn't support others abroad, that we should focus on the United States. So it's going to stretch different ways and really cause ripples around the world.
Let me ask you as well, it's already causing calls for dramatic emergency meetings. Brazil, the foreign ministry there is saying it wants an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council over these developments. We will probably see such meetings next week, peppering the calendar, not only in the city I'm in, New York, but in Washington. I'm just wondering what you think the fallout then is and how involved this gets.
Well, we already spoke about, the normalization completely thrown off track at this point between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others. I think a big strategic question on the table for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government is how do they respond? Do they, again, push back hard? I mean, clearly, Hamas has killed dozens, over 100 Israelis. We know nearly 800 wounded, and I suspect both numbers will go up fairly high. But do they say once and for all, we're not just going to retaliate and pull back, but we're going to really move in hard and heavy and deal with this problem once and for all? I don't know. I think that's the question on the table within the Israeli government, because they can't continue to go about this. Of course, Hamas' last major attack was 2021. It was an 11-day conflict. And during that conflict, they shot 4,300 rockets over 11 days. Today, in the last 12 hours, they've shot over 3,000 rockets. So you can see the escalation, the toll of injured and dead among Israelis. We have Hamas on the ground in Israel. The fact that they attacked by air, land, and sea is unprecedented. I mean, this is just really astounding what Hamas has pulled off. And it's going to, I think, cause a real strategic rethink by Israelis with regard to how they respond to Hamas and what they do in the coming days and weeks.
And how Israeli voters respond to Benjamin Netanyahu, or whether they blame him for this obviously surprise attack and where the intelligence might have failed. That's probably further down the road, as there's a rally around the country right now, and a rally around the prime minister who said, make no mistake, this is war. It is war. I'm just curious what you think about what kind of war and how big a war.
Well, clearly it's going to be Israeli forces moving into Gaza. The question is, again, will Hezbollah take advantage of this opportunity? If Israel is distracted more or engaged in the south, will they attack in the north? And of course, they have 100,000 or so rockets in southern Lebanon pointing at Israel. And that's not something Israel can defend against. Or does, again, Israel see this as an opportunity to finally...
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. When you see that they were able to pull this off in a surprise, who's to say that the next surprise won't mean more coordination with Hezbollah? And of course, they've had their own differences, substantial, but their greater enemy and the thing that unites them more is their hatred for Israel. So I'm just wondering how this gets various groups aligned in a way that a tragedy like this could only do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. I mean, they have the common enemy for them is Israel, and they would like to see the end of the Israeli state, a Jewish state. And that's Iran's goal as well, right? Their mantra is death to Israel and death to the United States. So, again, you could see this really widen. Israel could be at the point that they say, we'll take advantage of this opportunity to knock out Iran's nuclear program, because we know they're very, very close to having a sufficient amount of fissile material to create a nuclear weapon. What they've said publicly is they think it'll take 18 to 24 months to create an actual bomb. But nonetheless, Israel may take advantage of this situation as well to knock out, the biggest problem child in the Middle East, who is funding all these terrorists and providing training and rockets and whatnot, and to go after Iran once and for all, too. Who knows?
I want to get your sense of the environment for this, and you touched on it, Secretary, with this backdrop of division, even in this country, or continue to support the war in Ukraine, and now something that festers anew in the Middle East. And would people feel the same way if America is increasingly now looking at this and saying, we're far more focused on our border than Israel's border or Ukraine's border? Play that out.
Yeah, I don't think these are either or choices, and I'm confident the United States government, as has already been put out by the administration, will come to Israel's aid. I'm confident that the Pentagon and certainly Central Command is providing intelligence and whatever else that the Israelis might need. But, the shared values, the cultural affinity between our peoples, the relationship going back decades, we are going to support the Israelis. And plus, they are, our only democratic ally in the region. That's another important reason. But just the same, I think the higher level principle here is, will the United States help democracies in tough neighborhoods or alongside tough neighbors defend themselves? And when I say that, I'm talking now about Ukraine facing off against an autocratic Russia, and I'm talking about Taiwan facing off against the Chinese Communist Party who's running China. And will we continue to defend those democracies? I think it's in our national interest to do so, and I think we can afford to do so, particularly when we have countries like Ukraine who are willing to fight for their existence, and all they're asking for are arms and materiel and weapons. So again, to me, that's the underlying principle that myself as a Reagan Republican would follow. But that debate's going to be stirred up now again by this conflict that is emerging here right now.
You know, you might be right on any and all of that, Mark. I'm just curious, though, whether those who launch these attacks or maybe think that we're not keen on responding to attacks, or that we have these doubts, particularly with Ukraine. I don't know if it'll extend to this, to your point. Wouldn't they be galvanized by this and take advantage or test that?
Yeah, I think part of this is testing this. I think they're completely mistaken. Again, there's no way that I can see that the United States would not support Israel. We should absolutely 100% support the Israelis. This was an unprovoked, unprecedented attack, and not just against the Israeli military, but against Israeli towns and citizens and people. You know, your reporters talked about kidnappings and killings of Israelis in their towns and communities. That's just atrocious. It's horrible. Those are war crimes, right? So there's no way we're not going to support them. And so they've completely miscalculated if they think that's the case. Look, part of this, too, is dynamics within the Palestinian cause, dynamics between the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. I mean, there's a lot of different levels by which this gets peeled back and is driving the actions of Hamas. And again, as I said before, it extends well beyond Israel, the West Bank, Gaza. It stretches into Iran and elsewhere.
Secretary, well, final question, and you've been very patient, but I did want to follow up. We've learned a little bit more about this call on the part of Brazil for a Security Council meeting. You know, that's a rotating position. They will have that now. They have condemned these attacks. They think they stand in solidarity with the people of Israel. But one important footnote to their comments, it reaffirmed a commitment to a two-state solution with Palestine and Israel coexisting within mutually agreed and internationally recognized borders. Well, good luck with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a longstanding position in the United States through different administrations. I mean, that's the ideal, right? But the Israelis yet to find a partner on the other side who's willing to support, key parts of that. The two-state, a democratic Palestine, you name it. So, and certainly it's all set back now based on what has happened. So, right. Look, the United Nations has not always been a friend to Israel, that's for sure. Going by what you said, I'm glad Brazil started off by condemning that. So that's good news. But we'll see how this plays out in the UN. I don't see the UN as being a big player here. This is going to really come down between Israel, the Palestinians, United States support, and others providing both political, material, and other assistance to the Israelis as they fend off these attacks and reclaim their security.
Yeah, I mean, we must keep in mind that even 50 years ago, after the Yom Kippur attacks, the UN was very slow in responding to that, and let alone condemning that. So we'll see if history repeats itself, but still early. Secretary, always good seeing you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.